Good afternoon.
Oh, sorry, I forgot.
Yes.
And that wonderful dessert table out there, we have compliments of OnCourse.
It was good, right? I'm going to breeze through them pretty quickly. If you have questions about a tab or if you want to see something again, stop me and let me know. Because otherwise, we're going to focus most of our time today in on the discipline application. But for those of you that have not seen the student and guardian profiles, I'm going to make sure that you feel comfortable just even looking up that information if you need to. After we look at searching for the profiles, we'll then talk about how you can add a discipline incident to a student's profile, how you can apply a disposition or a consequence. We'll then move over and show you how you can create a letter for discipline, and we'll talk about the automation that OnCourse allows, where we can tie a rule to a letter that says, if a kid is caught bullying, trigger this letter, and then you guys can email and send it home. And then we'll talk about how you can run reports from the reporting tab. So that's our little pie chart that we've been looking at if you've been in other sessions. And then finally, we're going to end with the analytics tab, which is a visual representation of all the different reports that we're going to look at under this pie chart. So that's a little bit about how the day is going to go. If you guys have any questions or if you want to see something again, feel free to just stop me, and we can go ahead and just cover to make sure that you guys feel comfortable using the discipline module. All right. So again, we're going to use Chrome or Mozilla. You'll log in. Just so everybody is aware, you all have access to OnCourse University. So if we go into OnCourse University here, there is a tile specific to the discipline tracker. So you can either click on this tile, there's a bunch of videos that you can watch, and there's some PDFs that you can read depending on your learning style. Of course, you also have a search bar up here. So if you just type in a keyword, it's going to go ahead and filter down and just show you different reports and videos or PDFs and videos available relating to whatever keyword you've typed in there. So, you know, if you leave today and you forget something, OnCourse University is going to be there. You'll have access to it forever. And then additionally, you all have access to our support team. So if you've looked on OnCourse University and you still have a question or you're still confused about something, you can email our support team at any time, or you can also give them a call. If you want to talk to a live human, they're all in our office, and they're all really great, nice people that are willing to help whenever you need them. Okay? All right, so let's get started. We're going to click on Student Info, and we're going to go down to the People tab. Actually, I'm going to log in as somebody else. All right, so Student Info, People. And on the left-hand side, you have your search bar. So it'll default to your students, but if I click that drop-down menu, this is where I would go to search for a guardian profile. All right, so for our example today, we're going to stick with students. Then you can search for active, inactive, or both. So active kids are ones that are enrolled in your school, inactive kids are ones that have left or graduated, and then all is just a combination of both. Okay. You have your school drop down here. So if you're tied to multiple schools, this is where you would toggle to look for a student under a specific school. If you're just attached to the one school, then you can leave this filter alone. Okay. Now you can search for students by first name, last name, local ID, state ID, or phone number. So depending on what information you have about the kid, you could type it into the search bar and hit run search. Or if we leave this blank and I hit run search, it's going to give me all active students at this high school that I'm set to right now. Okay. The bottom right-hand corner will show you the total number of active students. So in this example, I have 422 kids. To open up a student's profile, all you have to do is click on their name. When I click on their name, their profile opens up and I'm greeted with the General tab. So again, we're going to breeze through these tabs pretty quickly, but if you guys are interested in a specific tab or if you have a question, let me know and we can spend a little bit more time. So under General, you can see some identification information about the student, things like their first and last name, what their grade level is, what school they're enrolled in, their homeroom teachers or teacher, if they have a counselor attached to them. We also have a field here for student notes. It has JPAMs in parentheses. So any historical notes that have been attached to a student's profile in JPAMs, we are importing that over to OnCourse for reference. So if you need to see that, you will be able to reference it in OnCourse. On the right-hand side, we can see if the student is active, what their local and state ID is, their picture, and if they're being promoted or retained for the upcoming school year. Now, general is broken out into the different sub-tabs that you're seeing down here across the bottom of my screen. So if I scroll down a little bit, the first tab I'm going to see is the student codes tab. Okay, so if a student has a special code related to them, this is where you would go to learn a little bit more about the student and their special code. Okay. Now moving across to the next tab, we have the student's contact information. So this is where you can see their phone numbers and their email addresses. The next tab over is the student address. So we can see their mailing address on one side and their physical address on the other side. Next up is the transportation and bus information. So if your student rides a bus, this is where you would go to find out a little bit more about that. And then the third column over here, we do have fields here for car information, license plate numbers, make and model. So if your kids drive to school and you record this information, this is the tab that you would go to find out that information. Okay. Next up is the student's demographics tab. Next over is their enrollment and program info tab. All of the information found under this tab is specific to the current school year. When we pop up and look at the enrollment tab up here in a couple of minutes, this is where you would go to see all of their historical enrollment records. But this tab here is going to be specific to whatever school year it currently is. Okay, as a side note, there's a little blue eye that we're seeing in this example. So anytime you see a little blue eye in OnCourse, if you click on it, it's going to give you a little description as to what that field contains and what type of data it's holding. Next over is the special education tab. We don't have any special ed information in here yet, but we are going to integrate with SIR. So whatever information you're traditionally used to seeing for your special education students, this is where you would go to look up that information as well. Okay, moving right along here. Next up is the Section 504 tab. So if any of your students have a 504, this is where you would go to find out a little bit more information about the student's 504 program. Continuing on, we have the miscellaneous tab. Right now, the miscellaneous tab is just containing student locker information. So if your students have lockers, this is the tab you would go to look up that information for your students. And our last tab under general is the record information. This is a read-only area to everybody. It's just gonna let us see the last person to modify the student's record, the date, and their IP address. Okay. So those are all of the different sub-tabs and categories underneath of general. Does anybody have any questions, or do you wanna see any of the tabs again? In the little pie chart area, that's where you would go to print the demographic sheet. The one that you're going to be looking for, it's called emergency contact listing. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but that's where you would go to print that. Any other questions so far?
Will the scanned documents from the registration center still be uploaded into this?
Yes, ma'am. Yep. And we'll talk about, that's going to be under the student portfolio documents tab. We're going to get there in a couple of minutes. Right. So if we bump up to the top here, the next tab over from general is enrollment. So this is where you can go to see students' historical enrollment records. Right now you're only seeing 2 years of information. If you click on the plus button next to a year, it's going to show you a little bit more information about that specific enrollment record. You have the ability to print or export this to PDF if you need it to. Okay. Next over is the student fees tab. So for those of you that are responsible for maintaining student fees, this is an application in itself. We're not going to train on it today. We're going to train you guys on this another time. But for our purposes today, if you ever needed to see if a student had a fee balance, this is the tab that you would go to look up that information. Okay. Moving along, the next tab we're seeing is the student's grades tab. Now I'm gonna bring up my demo here. We're gonna look at our buddy Rex Cooper for those of us that have been in other trainings. And this is what the grades tab will look like once your teachers start using their grade books. We can see all of the classes that the student is enrolled in, their instructor, and what their current marking period averages are. This is all live time, so anytime a teacher updates a grade in their grade book, if you go to the grades tab, it's going to reflect the most recent average for whatever marking period we're in. Now, if I click on this 89 next to my AP American History, I receive an option to view a progress report. So if I click on this, I can then come in and see all of the assignments for this class and how Rex Cooper has performed on each. I can print this if I need to as well. This is one area that you can run a progress report from the little pie chart, which is our reporting tab. That's where you would go to run progress reports for perhaps for an entire class or for one student for all of their classes. So this is just kind of a quick lookup for one class for Rex. If you need it to, you could export this grid to Excel, or you could also print it. Okay. The next tab over within a student's profile is their guardian and contacts. So OnCourse handles guardians and contacts the same as emergency contacts. So if we look at our buddy Rex here again, we can see that he has a bunch of different guardians attached to him, and we can see what his relationship is between each guardian. So for example, Eleanor Cooper is his mother, and Jamie Cooper is his aunt. Each guardian has a little magnifying glass next to them. So if I click on that magnifying glass, I receive two options, open record or open record in new tab. If I open the record in a new tab, I can then toggle back and forth between the student's profile and the guardian's profile. So now we're in Eleanor Cooper's profile. I can see their identification information up at the top. If I scroll down, I can see their phone numbers and their email addresses. I can see their mailing address. You guys are also going to see their physical address here and their demographics. Each guardian's profile has a tab up here for students. So if I click on that student tab, I can then see the students that this guardian is linked to. So in this example, Eleanor Cooper is attached to Rex as the mother, and Sadie Cooper, which is another student, and she's also the mother to Sadie. Okay. Now remember, we opened up Eleanor's profile in a new tab. So to get back to Rex's profile, I can either click on it, or I can close Eleanor's profile by clicking that little tiny X at the top of her name. And now we're just back in Rex's profile. Now there are two images on my screen that you most likely are not going to be seeing in your examples. If I look up at the top here, I can immediately tell that Rex has two things going on. First, he has a health alert. That's what this little red circle is symbolizing. So if I click on that health alert, I can then see that Rex has asthma. The little person that we're seeing has a red circle through it, letting us know that there's a custody issue here. So if I scroll down, I can see that Johnny Cooper is not allowed contact with Rex Cooper. And he's also appearing red in this screen, giving us an extra reinforcement to let us know, hey, this person's not allowed contact with Rex. Okay. Any questions about guardians or anything so far? All right. So trucking along across the top, the next tab over from Guardian and Contacts is Attendance. So this is one area I could go to see a student's daily attendance for the current school year. At the bottom, it's going to break it up into the different sort of subcategories. So I can see how many days absent, half day present, other, unexcused. I can see suspensions. I can see excused, tardy, how many times they left early or how many times they came in late, and their year-to-date absences. If I click on a day up here, you'll notice that my period attendance column bumped out. So what this is telling us is schools also have the ability to take class-based attendance. So I can see that on May 9th, Rex has an other, meaning he missed some minutes of school. And on the right-hand side, I can see that he was absent from American history, he was present in phys ed, and he was also present in biology. Again, this is just one area you can go to see student attendance information if you ever needed to access it while you're within the student's profile. To bump out that little period panel here, I can click on this arrow which says Expand Panel. That's where I'm going to get my class-based attendance, and to minimize it, I just have to click on this little arrow here. Okay. Once you guys start to use OnCourse throughout the years, you also will be able to go back historically to see what a student's attendance has been throughout the years that they've been with your parish. Okay. So our next tab over is the Student Schedule tab. This is where I can go to see what classes the student is enrolled in, which period they're taking each class, and what the instructor's name is. You'll notice I have a Print Schedule button up here, so if you ever needed to print the schedule from this screen, you can. But additionally, our little pie chart reporting area is also where you can go to print multiple student schedules at once. This is just an example of how to do it within the current student profile. Okay. I'm going to skip the Discipline tab because that's where we're going to spend most of our time, and I'm going to jump over to Notes. Under the Notes tab, if I click this Add button, I have the ability to create a post. I can send an email out, I can send an event, and I can also upload a document. So just to give you an example of what this tab could look like once we start using it, it's a way for administrators and teachers to collaborate together on a student. So if there's an event or if they need to kind of keep track of a situation that's going on, it's going to date and timestamp everything for you so you can go back and reference to see kind of what's going on with that student. You can export this to Word if you need to, and it's going to come out in a nice log format. Okay. So the last tab we'll look at before we jump into the good stuff is the student portfolio documents. So any historical documentation that has been attached to a student's profile in WebPAMs, we are going to import it over into OnCourse. So you will be able to see things like their registration packets, their birth certificates, their IBC credentials for our high school folks. All of that stuff's going to come over from WebPAMs. If this is an area that you traditionally have responsibility to maintain, then you're going to see this add button light up, in which case you have the ability to add a document and you can also add a discussion. If you traditionally just have read-only access to this area, then this is where you would go just to open up some of the students' documentation, and you can print it out if you need it to. Okay. Any questions about anything so far before we jump into the meat and the potatoes, AKA discipline? All right. So let's go ahead and click on the discipline tab. And we can see that in my example up here, Austin Abbott already has a discipline incident added to his profile. But let's go ahead and start from the beginning and let's add an incident from scratch. To do that, you're going to see a plus button up here called Add Incident. When I click on that, a new form will pop up. The first field that we're seeing is the student name. Because we're already in Austin's profile, we don't need to do anything here. It automatically knows that this discipline incident is for Austin. The next tab down we have is the discipline code. So depending on whatever situation the student is involved in, you would go ahead and you would choose what was happening with this kid. So maybe in this case, we'll keep it light and we'll say Austin was improperly dressed. The next field we're going to fill out is the location of the incident. So where did this occur? Perhaps in this case, it was in gym class. He forgot to bring his sneakers and he was wearing dress shoes. So in this case, I would select gym. The next thing we'll choose is the incident date. So when did this happen? I could, of course, just type in a date if I wanted to, or I can use my little calendar over here to select the date of the incident. So perhaps it happened today. The incident time, so what time of day did this incident occur? Maybe it happened at 11 a.m. You also have a referred by field. So if a teacher or an office staff member or a hallway monitor saw this occur and it wasn't yourself specifically, then you can come in and you can choose who this incident was referred to you by. All active staff from your building are going to show up, so then you can go ahead and choose who referred this incident. To clear this field, there's a little X. So let's say I accidentally chose the wrong person. I could, of course, just select somebody else, or I can click the X here, and it's going to go ahead and clear that field for me. Next up, we have the incident context. So by default, it's going to always give us on school campus, but I have the option to change it to off school campus or to a school sponsored event. Sorry? No bus. We can customize this list to say bus, but there's also a location of bus up here. Oh, okay. So I don't know which one I guess would be more appropriate. Perhaps it would be bus off school campus in that case.
It's still on school, yeah. Because
oh,
it's
okay. Got it. On school bus. All right, now you have two boxes to write a description. The first one is an internal box. It's pink. So whatever you put in here Only staff members that have access to the student's profile will see the comments. If you place a comment down here in the public description box, if your school chooses to display discipline on OnCourse Connect, which is the portal that students and guardians go to check grades and attendance, they will see that description. So you might not want to put something like, what an awful kid up here. Down here, you know, needs some work. So just be mindful of where you're placing. I don't want to hurt this kid's profile even though we're in a sandbox. All right. So pink is internal and then the white is public. Wearing dress shoes in gym class. I'll just change this back to gym. All right. Now you'll notice down here that the system is telling us that an administrator is going to be notified as soon as we save this incident. Okay. Now over on the right-hand side, you have your weapons category, your bullying codes, your physical evidence code, and your sexual assault code. You also have your incident flags down here. So depending on the scenario, you would go ahead and just select each accordingly. Now, if I were to change my discipline code to something like bullying, and I tried to save this, it's going to yell at me because now I need to add a bullying code. So some of the flags over here are logistically tied to some of your discipline codes, so the system will notify you if you're missing a field for state reporting purposes. So maybe in this case, bullying, and it was cyberbullying. Okay. Now, if we're done filling this incident out, I can save and close it, or I can save and add victims. So in a bullying incident, perhaps there are victims involved, in which case, let's go through that scenario. So I'll click Save and Add Victims, and a new window will pop up. I can search by my victim by first and last name. I can search by ID. And you'll also notice when I hit this drop down that it's giving me the ability to search for staff, student, parent, guardian, or non-affiliated person, because a staff could be bullied or a guardian could be bullied, depending on what the scenario is. You can also search by people by date of birth. If you don't have any of that information, if you leave these fields blank and you hit search down here, it's going to bring up all of the students in my building, all of my guardians, and all of my staff. So then I can attach the victims appropriately according to the incident. Just give it a second here as it searches through thousands and thousands of profiles.
In the live version, will it pull up all of these names? Because I have people from like outside of my school zone.
It will. Is that a problem, you think?
And it just has parents, you know, from like AD, Hammond, which is not, it might just be extra. But
right.
If it's just one or two people doing this.
Right. Yeah, it is going to give you all guardians in the district as well, and staff, I believe, too. So I guess you would just maybe just search for the victim using the search bars here if you don't want to look at everybody. Is that thunder? God, I'm missing all the good thunderstorms. Yes.
Can you add locations, or
Yes.
you don't have to do that?
We can do that.
Okay, it's like around.
Like,
That one definitely needs to be added.
okay, let me write that down.
And when y'all came up with the discipline codes, did you, what was your guideline on it? Because on our referrals that we get, they don't always match up with what what in the past, they haven't always matched up with
Are we gonna have a new discipline board?
Whoa, hang on. No, it's fine. Hey guys, there's some questions, so this might be useful to everybody. So the question is,
Okay. Where it has a discipline code on here.
okay,
Where did you get your criteria for the codes? Did you use a referral and get it from the referral itself? Or did y'all just come up with it? Because
we
when
use
I-
the state codes.
Okay, a lot of times when we're inputting the information, the discipline code on the program doesn't always match up with what's on the referral on the paper.
JPM just kind of has their own thing going on, honestly. So this is much cleaner, because this is only what the state requires. This is pulling directly from the state, so there's less to choose from, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Trying to keep it simple.
So in that case, perhaps you would just maybe want to type in a comment to be more specific to whatever the incident is. Okay. Sorry, you had a question.
No, that's what I was asking. Are we just gonna have a new form or is our form gonna change or discipline board?
The question is the discipline form going to change? The paper form, I guess you're talking about?
Is it that different as far as the options?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. That's about the same too. Another thing that we also discussed in the last disciplinarians training, currently in webcams, whenever you're entering your incidents, you're allowed to enter 3 or 4 different incident codes, but only the first one is what's actually submitted to the state. And here you're only going to be able to select one, so choose wisely. If you have other ones, you can type it in, no problem, but just choose wisely whenever you choose your code.
I don't see fighting on there.
I can't see what
Here too, they can also make a note in the note section.
Okay. All right, so let's go back and talk about, let's finish adding our victim to this incident. So we can see the victim's names, their date of birth. And then this here user type is going to let you know if it's a student or a guardian or a staff member. So from those of us in the earlier trainings, remember we can sort on these columns. So if I click on this user type column, it's going to go ahead and organize all of my different profiles together, depending, you know, on who you're looking for. So in this case, let's say we need to add London as a victim. Oh, sorry, London. Sorry, girlfriend. So we're gonna click the green plus button next to her name. And another form will pop up. So because we're your student information system, we already know what the student's gender is, what their age is, and what grade level they're in. So you don't have to worry about this area here. And then you'll go ahead and choose what the victim type is. So perhaps in this example, we're going to use student enrolled at this site, because this is another kid in our parish. The race information, again, we're your student information system, so we already know what their race is. And then down here, you can choose the injury code. So let's just make it light. We'll say minor cuts and bruises. Down here, you can then select what action was taken. Perhaps they went to counseling, and perhaps we contacted the parents. Once we're done adding the victim, I can hit save. And now we've successfully attached London as a victim to this bullying incident. You can, of course, add multiple victims if you need to, but if there's only one, then we can exit out of this screen by clicking on the X up here. Okay, now you'll notice that this column lit up, letting us know that one victim is associated with this discipline incident. Any questions so far? Does anybody want to see that again, or do we want to keep moving along? Move on. Okay. All right. So let's say, for example, there were a few kids involved in this bullying incident. Rather than going into 5 different students' profiles, I have a button up here called Copy to New. When I click on that, everything else that we filled out in the form is already pre-filled for us, but now we're gonna go ahead and select what other students were involved in this incident. So maybe it was Carly and James and Shelby. Okay, so you just use the check boxes next to the student names to designate who else was involved in bullying, and I can hit save and close. Now, it has copied this same incident over to the other 3 students' profiles. So I didn't have to go in and reinvent the wheel 3 different times. Good question. So we technically haven't applied an action yet. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll copy it again, and it will give you that option. So let's go look at that example. All right, so to apply a disposition or an action or a consequence, you'll click on the incident that you're applying the disposition to. When I do that, this Add Disposition button lights up down here. When I click on that, a new form pops up, and we're gonna fill this out specific to the action we're taking for this bullying incident. So the first field we'll look at is the disposition code. So depending on what we're doing with the kid here, perhaps we're gonna give them an after-school detention. Demerits, this is not a required field. So maybe your school uses a demerit system, in which case you could type in a number. If demerits mean nothing to you, then you can just leave this field blank. The date of the incident, it's gonna default to the current date, but you do have the ability to click, on the little calendar here, and you can select if it's happening, if we're giving an after-school detention perhaps tomorrow. Now, if you have a disposition spanning multiple dates, so let's say, for example, we're gonna give the kid suspension in school. I'll use my date calendar, and to multi-select different dates, you're gonna hold your control key down on your keyboard. And maybe this is happening on June 25th, June 26th, and June 27th. Once I'm done choosing the dates that the student is having an in-school suspension, I'll hit OK. And now we'll see that it has populated all 3 dates in that date field for us.
Y'all got that right. You have to get used to using your keyboard. Hey Bridget, one thing, I feel like we talked about this, but we talked a whole lot. Positive action class. Did we request to put that in there? Because I don't see it.
Is it not in there?
I don't see it, but I thought it was there at one point.
I don't see it.
I don't see it. We can add it as a disposition. Positive action class. Is that a state reportable field code?
Almost positive.
Sorry, what's the name of it? You want to just call it PAC,
That's
or do we want to spell it positive action? Got it.
Yeah. But I do remember.
Julie? Is kind of info suspension the same thing?
Yeah. A bit of this.
But it is the same thing. So we could actually use that instead?
I would prefer it that way, yes. But like,
ISS, ISC, because
As one disposition code? We can do whatever. We just want to make sure it complies with state reporting. That's it here.
Count the days in school and the day in school, it does not for a pass. It's kind of like a suspension. Yeah, but if it's, we have somebody.
Special ed kids.
Okay.
And regular ed kids.
Okay, so we can hash out like what state reporting code we want to tie in the background, but I wrote it down to add. So you guys, you'll see that in the live district. Yes, sir.
When we are, we input the days. When we input the days for like the suspension of the pack, is that gonna automatically roll over on the attendance side?
Good question.
Yes. I know.
It is?
It is.
Yay.
So
Y'all need to get up to date.
I talked to our developer yesterday and I said, yeah, they were talking about discipline, talking to attendance, and they were like, oh yeah, we're gonna do that. And I was like, I just told a whole class of people we weren't gonna do that. So we are gonna do that. It's still in development, so I don't know what it's gonna function like, but yes.
So what you, and one of the things that came up yesterday was in high schools, they only mark absent once, but now you say they can be marked absent each period of the day.
Yes, yes, but only one will count for daily attendance. That's the first period of the day, will count for daily. But then if I'm a social studies teacher for the period, I can then mark the kid absent or present if they're in my class.
I think 741 requires that because they have to have so much sick time in order to get credit for the
Yes.
class. So that's great. We need to get that word out before they have enough time.
Okay.
Because they were really worried about that.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses, so I
You're
can't
fine.
see the screen. But with the suspension, I know in webcams we could put in like how many days it would calculate with the return date. Is that possible? Or we have to kind of figure it out.
Return date where we,
Well, we can go in and say suspension. It starts this day and they're suspended for 5 days. It would example weekends. It'll tell them holidays and everything, and it'll tell us the return date as opposed to us trying to sit there and figure out.
And automatically calculated.
Like it had our the parents' calendar in it, so it knew our holidays and everything.
Yeah, like if we suspended the kid over, it was the day before the
winter.
a break, yeah, and then we said we want them to have 5 days. It would give, we could just put in 5 days and it would tell us the return date for students.
Oh, so you would just type in, you would say like December 23rd, 5, and then it would say,
Return date.
It would automatically calculate the return date based off of weekends and school holidays.
no, I don't think it's gonna do that. Hey guys, we're doing attendance at this point, all right? Sorry, it's the last session of the week, so I'm feeling sassy. Let me write that down, but right now I think you're just gonna have to choose the dates that the kid will be out. Okay. All right. Yes.
Is there a box where we say how many days they're suspended?
That's when we held the control key down and we picked the dates. That's how we're saying in school suspension. I chose the 25th, 26th, and 27th. Yeah.
Like, okay, so on the date thing where you put the little calendar and you can pick the dates you want them to be out. Could y'all make that calendar sync with our calendar, and so we couldn't click on a holiday?
When you go to report up to the state, it's going to know which dates you're in attendance and which ones you're not. So it's not going to be a reporting issue, but it's not going to yell at you right now. Ricky asked for that before. We have it in the pipeline, but I don't think it's going to be ready for the first day of school. Sorry.
Yeah, saving it, you know, sometimes it might not, saving it is something like right with the dates maybe.
Yeah, we had discussed that, but when we looked at our reporting logic, if we know that, you know, 6/23 is a Saturday and you put that in there and they submit it up to the state, it's not going to use that date because we're using it as like a weekend day.
The parents will though. That's how we pay, like, the parents be like, well, that's the date y'all counted, that's the date y'all said. Y'all said my kid can come back on Thursday, and they only been out 3 days, and it was really 25.
I think that's something we're gonna, they're gonna get to it.
Yeah.
It's just not gonna be there for the first day.
That's fine.
We have so much stuff to put in,
I know.
so it will eventually get in there. I'm just not, it won't be on the first day.
When I press control, I can't put down, then they can come back.
Did you already save it and then try to edit it? Yeah, it's a bug.
Okay.
It's a bug. Yeah, there's a gentleman over in another session, he was saying that oftentimes you'll create this position, but then you have to go back and adjust the dates later.
Right.
So I wrote that down as something to take care of. Sorry. Yeah.
I was just playing with it and click the Saturday to see what would it tell me, and then let it go through.
It does, but when you go to the state, like when you report to the state, it's not.
I'll have to clean it up.
Yeah, that'll be Julie, she'll hate me in like 6 months. Just kidding, Lilas.
Bridget, we'll just send you all the email.
That's fine. I get it anyway. All right, any other questions before we move on through the rest of our disposition form? Yes.
All right, so the stuff that we're going over right now, that's what the admin, like at our school, the teachers schedule the electronic referrals. So would they see like the birth, would they be able to enter it electronically, the discipline for a student?
That's to be determined.
I've never got a straight answer from CWA, so we did not train the teachers on how to do it this week.
Well, it was, I know that, I think in the past, like school choices, like everybody makes just expert.
Right. So as of right now, things can change.
Just so you know, we can customize each code and we can allow teachers to enter. It's not an on-course limitation, it's just whether or not your district decides to do something uniform or they let schools make their own decisions. Just letting everybody chat for a minute, get it all out. I'm just gonna give them a minute. Let it all out. I know, should I turn this on?
Why haven't I used this all week?
Colette, what do I do? All right. I need a headset next time so I can walk around with the mic. All right. Let's keep going. Let's keep going here. After we've selected our dates, we can then choose our time in and time out. So let's say, for example, this is going to be an after-school detention. We'll use one example here. And maybe this is going to be from 2:45 to 3:45. Now, the minutes removed, we had quite a bit of discussion on this in the earlier sessions. Just ignore this field for now. unless you hear from us otherwise. All right. Now, you are seeing an administrator drop down here. When we click on it, nothing's happening. That's because we haven't designated who the discipline administrators are at each building yet. So once we define that in your live district, then you would just go in and choose who the administrator is for this specific disposition. Then you choose the administrator type. So we have a couple options here. Just kind of stick on this screen for a second for you to scan it. And maybe in this case, we're going to say this is an assistant principal. The location field is just a text box in the disposition. So it's not required, I don't believe. So we could just say, you know, office or classroom or wherever it's taking place. And that's just going to be an internal identifier for you folks. Yes. Yes, like where, what, you know, we could even get granular and say room 202. You can leave a comment. So if you had a comment about this specific disposition, you can type it in this box. If you have no comments, then you can just leave this blank. If this was taking place in an alternative site, then you would go ahead and fill this field out here. Remember, to clear a field, you have that little X, and then we can go ahead and clear that value. There's also a checkbox for corporal punishment. So if that was, is that a thing? All right, so if you're using corporal punishment, check it off. If not, then leave that unchecked. Okay, so once we're done filling out the disposition form, I can save this, or I can save and new, which means now I can apply a different disposition. So maybe we have multiple dispositions. Perhaps we're giving this kid an after-school detention, but we could also give them an ISS or really whatever the scenario is. So again, this is not self-saving, so you want to either save it or save and new. Okay, so for those of you that have placed multiple dates in your disposition form, you should be seeing multiple dispositions appear down at the bottom here. Okay, in my example, I just chose the one date. Questions? This one here? That's actually just expanding the disposition form without opening it. If you need it to delete it, you would click on the pencil, and then you would hit delete. Okay. Any questions about adding a disposition?
In the old system, when we would print a court report, it would have our comments and everything associated with the discipline. Is this system going to do that as well?
Yes.
Will the system have, depending on the severity of the discipline, the parent has to return the children back to school?
I'm sorry, I don't think I.
After suspensions, will the parent have to come back to school and bring the child back? Will the form have that on there? Because it depends on what the disposition is. If the child was in something that requires the parent to bring them back to school after school.
Yeah, I would just, I guess, type it in the comments, you know, parent must return student. I think that's what you're asking.
Right,
Yeah.
so that part, when we just went over about the corporal punishment, maybe that should be taken off altogether, and then the part with the parents on there, put that on there.
As a checkbox. Do you guys, is the corporal punishment mean nothing to you? I'm sorry? We added it for your state. It's new to me. I'll ask about that. I didn't think so. I don't think can anybody do corporal punishment? Like what? It's not like 1800s.
I went to go with my child, somebody, and
All right, so I'm gonna like ask them to remove that. I thought it was strange when I saw it the other day. I thought it was specific to the state, but apparently we're all in 2018, so that's good for us. Yes.
If we have like a step 6 here.
Step 6. Okay.
But where do we put the hearing results? Is there a place to do that?
Where do you do that right now? Do you put it in the disposition? Do you type it in as like a comment?
It's a different tab on discipline, and it's all the hearing information, like you type up everything that happened in the hearing, and you tell what the hearing results were, like they're gonna send them to an alternative school, how long they're gonna send them, what they have to do to go back to school. Yeah, but. Yeah, so you change it.
You could also use that notes tab that we looked at earlier. So just so you guys know, the notes tab that we looked at, the development team is pushing out a new notes tab. It's actually going to be pushed out at 4 o'clock Eastern time, so we're not going to see it today. But you're going to have the ability to label a note as confidential if you have the proper resource, and then only other users with that confidential resource are going to be able to see that note. So I would either recommend put it back in the disposition or keep a log in the notes tab, and then you can, that'll go onto the court report.
The significance of that is the child is expelled, is going to be transferred to the alternative school or the out of school. If they're going to have to withdraw them from their school, and the new procedure is that's supposed to happen before we leave the hearing.
Okay. So I would use the notes tab to record any of that information after the hearing has taken place. And then you can mark that as confidential if you don't want other people to be able to see that. So we're talking about after a court hearing, you bring your kid to, where do you put the results in after that? We're talking about using the notes tab that we looked at earlier to keep track of all of that information. All right. So, yes, absolutely. Okay. So, does everybody feel okay to keep moving on here? Do we want to go back and look at anything else again? Okay. All right, so I'm in my demo right now. I want to show you guys how you can add a letter. Okay, now we talked in the beginning about the automated letters, which we're going to look at a little bit later. But when I'm within a student's profile, I have a button up here called letters. Okay, now this is my ability to send a letter on the fly. So I can click on this, and I can click send new letter. Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna place a default letter template in for every school. So when I use this drop down here, you guys aren't gonna see anything, but in my demo here, I can choose a letter template, and it's gonna go ahead and populate whatever language we put in the background. So it's gonna fill in information like the student's name, their grade level, their homeroom teacher, and any other form fields is what we call them, to populate based off of whatever student's profile you're in. So you will have a template available to you, but if you don't want to use a template, then I can just send my own letter. Dear Rex, please stop being bad. You know, whatever you want to say, please stop. And then this is just a text editor. So I could come in and, you know, I could change my font if I wanted to, and my size and my color. But again, you're going to have that default template available. So you won't have to type a letter if you don't want. Okay. I think there is, oh, there's, yeah, so watch, I'll just type in here, and then you have to hit this little guy. So it's like it's not gonna automatically spell check because this is not like in the web browser.
So this letter is addressed to
Whoever you want, so parent, the template I believe is gonna say to the parent / guardian of, and then we'll fill the student's name in.
so we print it out and just.
Okay. So before we move away from the discipline tab and we start looking at reports and the automated letters, does anybody have any questions or do you want to see anything again?
It keeps track of the letters you send out.
Yes. Yes, it does. Yep.
Keep track of what?
The letters. Sent by, sent on, it'll show you that.
So you do the letter in addition to the copy?
In addition to the,
The actual referral.
if you want to send a letter, yes. It depends on what your policy is. So if you don't traditionally send a letter and you just send a referral home, then you don't have to do both. But if you want to, you can.
It's not like just the letters here. Does it also generate a letter for attendance?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, and we're gonna look at that tab in a second. Yes, yes in the back. Yes, yeah, we're gonna jump over there. Before we move away from this tab, is everybody comfortable adding a discipline incident and applying a disposition?
Can you save, the letter to the hard drive on your computer?
Yeah.
And like on class builder, teaching class builder, they can actually pull up the discipline referral and attach it to the class builder to a comment.
Yeah, you would just save and print it, and you would just print it as a PDF. And then you would save it to your network or to your desktop or whatever.
When you're in the print mode right there, you can change the printer to PDF.
Yep, change that, save as PDF. And then when you save it, you can choose which location you want to save on your computer. Okay. All right, so let's look at the automated letters that we have the ability to generate. So there's nothing that you'll need to do in this case. We're going to take care of this all behind the scenes for you. So let me bring up my demo here and let's look at our buddy Rex Cooper. What the heck's my password? Okay. So you're not going to see anything right now when you click on this, but under student info, there's a tab here called letters. When I come in here, my attendance letters and my discipline letters that I've set up in the background are automatically going to generate to this tab. So let me give you an example. If we toggle our letter type to discipline, we've set up a few rules at the elementary school that says if a student is caught cursing, send this letter. And we can apply a number too. We can say if a kid is caught, bullying 2 times, send this letter. So all of that stuff is going to be set up in the background. We're going to put a default kind of letter and rule in there. So then you can just come into the letters tab and you can see if any students have reached that rule. From here, Gretchen Grunler, if I click on this little button here, it's going to go ahead and populate whatever letter we've placed in the system. I can delete the letter, which means I don't want to send it home. I can print the letter and snail mail it home or send it home with the kid, or I can email the letter. So let's find, Gretchen's not going to have one. So when I select email, any guardian that was labeled as send mail, I can then email this and mark as sent. Any letter that you send from this tab will accumulate under here, under the sent letters area. So you can always go back historically and see how many times you had to send a letter home for a kid. Now, sorry?
It's going to have first offense, second offense.
Yes, whatever rules we set up, it'll display it, just kind of like in this example here. Now, I could go individually into each kid and email it or send it home, But you'll notice that there are check boxes here. So I could check them all off, come up to actions, and I can email all of them at once if I needed to, or print, or delete. Update letters, just so you guys know, that means if you haven't refreshed your browser, rather than refreshing your whole browser, if I hit this button, it's gonna go ahead and search for any new kids that may have reached a discipline rule that we have in place. So that's what that function is doing there. Now, just for everybody's reference, the letter type that we're looking at right now is for discipline, but if I use this drop down, I can also see daily attendance and class attendance. So again, we can set up rules. In this example, in my high school, I have a bunch of students who are hitting my 2-day unexcused absence rule. In which case I can come in here, I can preview the letter for the kid, and again, I can delete, print, or email this as I need to. Okay. Any questions about the letters tab before we look at reports? Okay. Yes.
Will we be able to make any modifications to the template you give?
Yes, sir. Yep, so I can come in here, and if I don't want to say this, I can say, here is my own letter. Whoop. And then you can just print and save as needed.
And you can save those to your hard drive as well.
Yep, you would use the print save as PDF function. Okay. All right, so let's look at reports. So that's going to be our pie chart. So everybody click on your reporting tab. And under here, again, for those of us that have been in a few trainings, you know that this tab not only contains discipline reports, but this is also where we can see attendance, grades, we can see student schedules, the whole shebang, all right? So as you notice, I have a ton of reports available to me. Everybody has a search bar up here. If you type in the word discipline, it's gonna narrow my reports down to only show me my discipline reports. So then, depending on what I wanna look at, I would choose the report and I would run it. So we're gonna look at a couple examples. As you can see, there's a ton of reports. We're not gonna have a chance to go into every single one. So what we're recommending is find a report in OnCourse that you see yourself running often and write the name down. When you get into your live district, you can tag a report as your favorite. So when you tag a report as your favorite, every time you access the reporting tab, all of your favorite reports are gonna organize themselves to the top of the list. So you don't have to go hunting for it every time. So let's look at a quick example here. And let's use our unresolved incident reports. I think this will be useful for the group here. What this report is going to show us is any student that has a discipline incident that has not had a disposition applied yet. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and fill out my parameters on my report according to what I wanna see. All right, so let's go through this quickly. We'll say at my high school, I can even drill down into one code or a few different codes, or if I leave it set to all, it's gonna show me all. I can filter by grade level, so maybe I'm responsible for a specific grade at my school. I can then choose a grade, or again, I can just leave it to all. You can also filter to all students, general ed students, or special ed students. Okay, so I'm just gonna leave it to all for now. I can choose to show my incident description if I want. And I can also choose how I wanna sort my information. So I can either sort it by infraction or by student. So I'm just gonna choose student in this example. The last set of parameters you have are your start and end dates. So maybe at the end of every week, you go in and you have to see this information. you would just apply your start and end dates accordingly. Because this is my demo, I'm gonna go ahead and go all the way back to January 1st, and I'll hit View Report. From here, I can see Nathan Abbott. He has a disruption in class discipline code attached to him, but we haven't given him a disposition yet. If I look a little bit further down, Dogbird Adams, he has a bunch of different bus incidents tied to him, but we have not given him a disposition for any of them yet. All right, so this report, again, that's gonna let you see discipline incidents without a disposition. And from here, I can download this, or I can print it if you need it to. Okay. Now to get back to our big reporting list, I'm gonna hit this button here, back to report list. Now I'm back in my screen and I can choose another report I wanna run. So let's go ahead and run one more, and let's choose Discipline Incident Summary Report by School. So I'll click on that report. Again, I'm greeted with my parameters, so I'll go ahead and fill this out. So I can choose to display student name, or if I don't want it to show my student name, I can then just display local or state ID. Choose my school. I have my grade level filter. I also have the ability to include inactive students. So maybe you have to run a report for kids that left. You do want to include them so you can see what your discipline looks like. Again, I can choose an individual student or just a group of students, or I can then just hit all, and it's going to give me all kids in my building. Here's my discipline code filter. So maybe I'm just interested in running a report for students that have abusive language, or again, I can just leave it to all. I can include all students, general ed or special ed, NCLB, which we're gonna skip. If I wanna include my internal comments and my public comments, remember the pink box versus the white box? You can choose to display either, both, or none. And your start and end date. So again, I'm gonna go back to January. And I can group my incidents by code or by date. So I'll leave it to code and I'll hit View Report. All right. This one is. I'm just kind of showing you a few of them. So if I go back, just to show you all, any report that has an XLS next to it, that's going to be in Excel. The little paper icon is PDF. We're going to look at the Analytics tab in just a minute, and that's where you can actually drill in to the specific event to see a little bit more information. Okay. So again, there's a ton of reports in here. We're not going to go through every one. Does anybody have any questions about reports? Do you want to see anything again?
If you just want to do a like fine referral, like you just want to list of all the referrals in your school, you just go and put the dates and all students.
Yep, absolutely. You can even run reports on dispositions. So I just showed you the discipline incident ones, but down here you have a discipline disposition report by school as well. By grade level, by month, all that fun stuff here. Okay.
So like, once we, like, a discipline report is filled out and we want to print that information, we have to go to that reporting tab again?
Yeah.
And so you would, what would that be called, like individually, you know, like you went in and you filled out this one report, you want to print it out?
I would probably do the incident summary report, and then you can come in and choose one kid that you're looking for. So if I choose Rex Cooper, he's our kid here. Now, I applied a big date range for Rex. So this is showing me all of his discipline incidents. But if I just wanted the one, I could then come in, did I add one? We'll say 2-4.
So this page here is everything you have already in that time period.
Yes, just because I put a big time period in. So if I narrow it down and I just want to see a specific date and I hit view report, then in this case, I can see that Rex was involved in fighting on February 4th.
So that's the detail of the report then?
This is one of them. Let me think if there's a different one here. Discipline.
Yeah, that's the one I want to see.
Hint summary.
I was wondering why they didn't have a district-wide. It's gonna be though.
I'm just trying to see if I can find a good one here. So here's another one. It's really going to be any of your discipline incident reports. They're all going to, some of them look, you know, in a similar format, but most of them look like this PDF format. Yes.
Is that where would that be?
So the question is, what about the court report? So the court report is also going to be found under the reporting tab. It hasn't been deployed yet, so I can't show it to you right now. But it will be under the reporting tab that we're in right now. I don't think we're going to call it the court report because we're combining the court report and the student leave entry package together. But then you'll just select whatever parameters you want to see on that report. I think we're going to call it the student information report or something, but we'll make sure we let you know what it's called so you know what it is called. But regardless, it's going to be under this little pie chart area. Sure. Are you a district-wide person? Then yes, ma'am. You're not, right now, are you only tied to one school probably?
So everything is like.
Okay. It is district. So that's based off, because in my demo, I'm tied to all my schools. So the question is, what if I'm at a district level and I need to run discipline at a district level? You will be able to, based off of your schools. So I'm just going to write your name down to make sure. We have all of your permissions configured in the live district, but we're in the sandbox. So I'm sorry, what's your last name? T. What's your first name? All right. Okay. Other questions about the reports found under our reporting tab? All right. So the last thing we're going to look at, right? Yep. Is the analytics tab. Now, you guys are not going to see this on your screens right now. So this little blue analytics tile, this is where you can go to see visual representation of the reports that we were just running. So for our specific example, I'm going to drill down to behavior. Okay. Now, we have different cards to represent the different scenarios. So for example, if we look at the first card here, we can see all of our major offenses: bullying, death threat, harassment, smoking. So if I actually click in on a card and I click in on a specific incident, I can then see which students were involved in my bullying premeditated incident. The analytics, you use the little tree navigation up here to go forward and back. So I can go back to behavior and I can continue on. So the next card we're seeing is a heat map. So this is letting us see which dates we had the most incidents. So if we look at August 1st, that's a pretty dark color, which is letting us know there was a lot of stuff going on that day. So if I click on the date, I can then see which kid had a discipline incident for that day. Going back to behavior and continuing down, I can see incidents by day and dispositions by day. Again, these are heat maps. I can see behavior by subgroups. So ethnicity, special ed, ELL versus non-ELL, incidents by gender. I can drill into any of the cards, and I can see all my females that have been involved in the discipline incident. Going back here just to show you guys a couple more examples. We can see student classification if they're economically disadvantaged, classification by school, behavior statistics, so I can even drill in by location. So I can see that in my classroom and my hallway, I have the most incidents occur. So here's my classroom incidents. It's gonna break it out now in this example by discipline code. So I can then click on my bullying and I can see which kids are involved in bullying. Keeping on here. I can even see incidents by referrer. So if I click on this card, I can see all of my staff members and who created a discipline incident.
The data from the last school year will merge into the last.
No, sorry. The question is, we're gonna bring it in for like a read-only reference, but it's not gonna translate into the discipline application. So the question was your historical discipline information. We can display it in the student's profile, but it's not gonna be in that interactive area that we looked at earlier.
So we won't see it like this.
No, exactly. Yep. Yep. All right. You can even see trends by school. So if you are at the district level, I can come in and actually see my trends by school and my disposition trends by school. And again, I can drill into each of the different cards here. In this example, we're actually showing you 4 years of discipline data. So I can see that in the 15-16 year, you know, my elementary school had quite a bit of incidents, but for 17-18, it looks like they're going down a little bit. All right, so once you start to use the OnCourse Discipline app from year to year, it will overlay the data for you so you can kind of compare and contrast if you need to. All right, I didn't show you this, but you can add a filter too. So if I needed to, I could then filter on the view that I'm looking at here in analytics. And that's discipline. Questions, comments, concerns?
Those reports you just went through, all those different ones where you can get whatever, you can print those?
Yes. Yes.
You have two options of pie chart or the bar. You got two options of how you can.
So you can't print this screen in here. Are you talking? Wait, maybe you can actually.
It's just a listed version.
My God. God, am I that boring? People are fainting on me. So under the pie chart, you can print these reports in here, but the analytics, you cannot print. If you have a specific resource, you can shoot it out into a PowerPoint. I'm not sure how you do that actually. Thanks, Amy. Where? Left, what? Oh, this? Oh, thank you, Amy. Yay, Amy. Amy's using analytics more than me, apparently. So yes, you can. So I can email, print, Excel, CSV, or PowerPoint. Let's do a PowerPoint. Let's see what this looks like. Right. So you can take all the credit. Look at this hard work I put into this PowerPoint. Right? Yep. Thanks, Amy. All right. You can also set notification alerts. So usually we recommend like attendance, for example, like your ADA, if you want to be notified if it goes below a specific percentage. But you could also set up alerts to say, you know, show me if things have changed, by who, and for whatever value you want. So then when you log into analytics, a little bell will pop up and let you know, hey, this card you put an alert in for, and you can view it that way. What else here? Okay. Any other questions or thoughts?
All of that, once it goes live in July, all of the information that we basically say, this school year should be in this format.
No. It's going to be available in like a text format. I think we're going to create a text field and then you're going to be able to reference it. But because the data was not collected in OnCourse, it's not going to display in analytics, unfortunately. What? July 9th is the cutover. We're getting close. No. Oh, yes. Yes, you can play in the sandbox. Yeah. But you don't want to play in your live district because that's going to impact students. No. We're not going to copy discipline from the sandbox over. So teachers have been playing with grades and office staff have been playing with attendance, and that's all in the sandbox. So just be careful when we go live. If you do want to play in the data, make sure you're in the sandbox login and not your live login. Because when we do go live, you're going to use your regular school credentials to get in to OnCourse, and now you're just going to have a bunch of tabs up at the top. So if you've used OnCourse in the past for lesson planning or your classroom application, now you're just going to have a bunch of tabs to go to, and it's going to be in your live district. Good. I'm so glad.
I thought it was gonna be over. Because you're so used to one thing,
Right.
You're scared.
Yes, change can be very scary. Good. I'm glad to hear that. I bet. Yeah. There's been a lot of changes. Sorry. Oh, that was the first discipline module. That's the first.
And then went to something else, and then it went to JPANs, and then it went to WebPANs.
Oh yeah, JPANs changed their stuff a lot.
I'm still even accounting.
Yeah, change is scary, but it's also necessary and good sometimes. I have to remind myself when things are you're happening to yeah, I love that. Oh God, especially at the end of the year. So the keynote is really like right before winter break. It's gonna be super dark colored because there's a bunch of kids who have a lot of because they're all excited. we have an all schools function, so let me just show you that real quick. So like, let's say you're in the people tab, you'll just see this, all schools. And when you're running a report, depending on what you're looking for, now the district one is going to be, the district is already just set to district. So this report name is called district-wide, exactly wide.
For y'all leave, we have stipends for people who are not 12-month employees. Come walk around if you need a stipend. Please fill it out. Make sure you put your employee ID. And we're gonna do 2.5 hours, so it's gonna be $37.50. And then please make sure you put your signature, address, and other information.
Yesterday was 2 hours.